All right. Well, it looks like it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Naval Warfare Studies Institute Seapower Conversation series. I'm Captain Doug Otte, retired U.S. Navy. I'm a senior lecturer in the Naval Postgraduate School and at the Naval Postgraduate School, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. We're going to be talking about a discussion that centers on the naval warfare at the operational level. No longer are we going to be fighting at the carrier strike group, expeditionary strike group level doctrine, but a doctrine that really fights a fleet as a fleet. Obviously, we're going to get a lot more on that a little bit later. I do have a couple admin announcements that I'd like to share with you before we get into our discussion. Amanda has already mentioned in the chat, but if we could ask you to mute your microphones, please, during this portion of the presentation. Also, if you care to turn off your video at this time, we would greatly appreciate it. Our discussion today is going to be threefold, if you will. First, we're going to have a presentation probably about 20 minutes long on Navy Warfare Publication 3. And then there's a structured Q&A session that I'm going to interchange with Mr. Negus, who is our guest today. And then at the end, we're going to open the conversation up to you all, the attendees. At that time, there's two ways that you can ask your questions. The first is go ahead and type a question into the chat. I'll go ahead and be monitoring the chat, and I'll answer or ask those questions for Mr. Negus to answer. The other way, and perfectly honest, for me, the preferred method would be just go ahead and raise your hand, use that hand raising function. I'll call on you, and then you can go ahead and turn your microphone on and turn your video on and have the conversation directly with Mr. Negus. I'd now like to introduce Mr. Tom Negus to you all. Again, he is the author of the Naval Warfare Publication number 3. He was a career Navy surface warfare officer, commanded the USS Defender, the USS Gunston Hall, and with a follow-on major command, commander of Amphibious Squadron 6. Some other significant tours that Tom had include BUPERS, Bureau of Naval Personnel, ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence, and then on CNO staff, the OPNAV staff. He also was the creator and the first commander of the Counter-IED Task Force in Afghanistan, which again, I haven't even had this discussion with Tom, but kind of resonates with me as I was one of the guys that was kind of tapped to go over there and help set that one up the first time, but I wasn't allowed to do that. So congratulations on that tour also, Tom. His final tour in the Navy before retiring after 28 years of active service was as the Chief of Staff of the Expeditionary Strike Group 2. After retirement and not having enough travel time in his back pocket, he began working in international oil and gas industry, generally across the Eastern Asia and Middle East. In 2018, he moved on and settled down, joining the Navy Warfare Development Center as the doctrine writer. His work has consisted primarily of the 2020 revision of the Naval Warfare Doctrine publication, NWP-3, and then, as I've mentioned already, he was the author of NPW-3. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Tom Negus. Tom, it's over to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, Otter, and thank you for the invitation to speak to you and the Naval Warfare Studies Institute today about Navy Warfare Publication 3, Fleet Warfare. So we've got NWDC, Navy Warfare Development Command, promulgated NWP in March of this year, 2021. And it followed a robust 2-year development and review process that included all 7 numbered fleet commanders and their staffs, actually 2 rounds through them. Once the numbered fleet commanders had approved it, reviewed and approved it, we forwarded it to all 3 4-star major fleet commanders for their review, approval, and signature. Throughout that process, I was assisted greatly through a concurrent peer review process that incorporated great insights and ideas from folks like Jeff Klein there at NPS and the Naval Warfare Studies Institute, subject matter experts at Center for Naval Analysis, to include Pete Swartz, who was very helpful, the Naval War College, and fleet reviewers. Now, NWDC undertook to create an entirely new publication focused on the operational level of war, based on the Navy's longstanding efforts at improving proficiency at the OLW, a recent Fleet Forces Readiness Kill Chain analysis that identified a doctrine gap at the OLW, and of course C&O Gilday's mandate in FRAGO 01 Tech 2019 to master fleet level warfare. So it's no surprise it follows then that the intent of this is to provide a doctrinal foundation for fleet warfare at the OLW. And its purpose, as you can see, is to standardize, align, and focus individual and collective understanding and efforts of numbered fleets, across the numbered fleets and component commands. So the vision for NWP-3 was to create a relatively short and readable doctrine publication. Now, that probably sounds like an oxymoron to many of you, but I encourage you to download it from the Navy Warfare Library and available at the NWDC site and determine for yourself. But that was the idea, to produce something that was digestible in about an hour, that would provide fundamentals for fleet warfare at the operational level of war. So four simple or easy short chapters. The first one, fleet warfare, kind of definitional, providing the architecture of naval warfare, and discusses the current geopolitical context. Second, the operational level of fleet warfare, where we discuss the operational framework for maneuverability and risk geometry, discuss the Navy operational concept, and identify 3 campaigns inherent in fleet warfare. Chapter 3 provides maritime perspective on operational art and design, and Chapter 4 provides insight regarding organization and C2. It's augmented with an appendix at the end, a case study of Admiral Spruance in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, just to provide kind of real-world examples on some of the ideas that are discussed in the publication. Okay, now, to ensure rigor, NWP-3 builds on the intellectual foundation that was first provided in NDP-1, Naval Doctrine Publication 1, with an ends, ways, and means construct across all levels of warfare. So you ought to be able to see a column on the left. These are the enduring naval products across the levels of warfare. That command of the seas in the upper left corner refers to the Mahanian notion of free and open access and unfettered use of the seas necessary for our nation to flourish. So this is a fundamental strategic pillar of our nation, necessary for our security and prosperity, and it is squarely the Navy's fundamental duty to protect that condition. Of course, our nation's use of the seas is founded upon our sea power, defined as the influence exerted by our ability to impose conditions from and within the maritime domain in support of our national objectives. Our sea power is founded, of course, on our ability to achieve warfighting excellence across the tactical realm of our warfighting areas. Now, the recent Tri-Service Maritime Strategy, TSMS, Advantage at Sea, defines that as integrated all-domain naval power. So I've updated the slide here to show that in the product. But in short, naval power is our tactical ability to defeat our enemies at sea, whereas sea power is the influence that capability gives us to pursue strategic objectives. Our ability, of course, to achieve that integrated all-domain naval power depends, of course, on our combat-ready forces that are produced at the unit level. So these are the products of the naval service across the levels of warfare. So at the tactical, or rather at the unit level, the Navy takes people, platforms, equipment, and trains, maintains, leads, commands them to produce combat-ready forces. The ends of the unit level are combat-ready forces that form the means toward success at the tactical level of war. At the tactical level, those task-organized combat-ready forces achieve tactical success through the orchestration of warfare areas to win battles and engagements. The ends of the tactical level of warfare is that naval power that forms the means towards our operational success. Now, the commander working at the operational level of warfare orchestrates that tactical activity through campaigning to impose conditions across regions that support national level objectives. The enduring functions of the naval service are operational objectives that achieve strategic results. At the strategic level of warfare, then, sea power is combined with other elements of national power to achieve national objectives. Our enduring naval functions listed there: sea control, power projection, deterrence, maritime security, and sea lift. Those are what the Navy does. That's why the nation has a Navy, for those purposes. The warfare areas, the surface warfare, expeditionary warfare, et cetera, that's how we do it. So this is the intellectual backbone of naval doctrine that defines the linkages of activity and effort across all levels of warfare, from each individual and unit all the way through our nation's strategic objectives. That's how they're connected. And this is described in the foreword of Naval Doctrine Publication 1, signed by CNO, Commandant of the Marine Corps, and Commandant of the Coast Guard, and is specifically included as a graphic in NWP-3. So this is intellectually how the pieces of the naval warfare enterprise fit together to form the tapestry of sea power for our nation. So chapter 1 closes by adding context to that architecture by discussing the two dominant features that are shaping fleet warfare today. The first of those, the incredible advance of technology. The second, of course, is a resumption of great power competition. The former drives the Navy to synthesize power at the fleet level, where tactical capability required in a fight now increasingly exceeds the reach, the authority, the access of the locally deployed commander, and requires fleet level action to affect that tactical level outcome. Of course, the resumption of great power competition, fleet warfare in an era of great power competition is certainly going to require the Navy to overcome geographic, organizational, and administrative boundaries to operate as a globally unified force. Now, in fleet warfare, the significant investment required to achieve capability at sea, in terms of time, manpower, equipment, money, technology. What that means is that once a fleet is significantly degraded or lost, it's nearly impossible to recover in a strategically relevant time frame. Therefore, in fleet warfare, tactical activity is often magnified into strategic level effects. As NWP-3 states that, when you lose the ability to contest at sea, you de facto lose the sea, save for the benevolence of the victors. Now, chapter 2 goes on to discuss kind of the geometry of risk by describing 3 factors that influence maneuver through the maritime domain. Of course, geography, sea lanes of communication, and enemy reach. The traditional forms of land-based and seaborne reach that we're used to, and now increasingly a global form of reach that's available through exploitation of space and cyberspace domains. So their interplays shade areas with greater or lesser military value and of course, corresponding risk. NWP-3 leans heavily on the work of Wayne Hughes and his 5 processes in naval combat to inform the development of the Navy's operational concept. So sea control is the bedrock of sea power. It enables all other naval functions. But sea control obviously comes from prevailing in naval combat. And so NWP-3 reviews Hughes's 5 processes of naval combat and then extrapolates them to develop the naval concept that's listed there, to leverage integration, distribution, and maneuver to seize, maintain, and exploit freedom of action in the maritime domain. Chapter 2 also closes with a discussion of the 3 discrete campaigns that are inherent in fleet warfare. Essentially, the campaign to support the joint strategic military objective, the campaign to achieve maritime superiority, and the campaign against an enemy's national use of the seas. Essentially, a joint campaign, a sea control campaign, and a blockade campaign. History suggests that all 3 will interact in fleet warfare, and in particular, the joint campaign and sea control campaign will likely be quite entangled. NWP-3 asserts that winning in battle is the height of tactical excellence, fighting the right battles is the height of operational excellence, and to prevail in fleet warfare requires both. So since war is fought at the tactical level, but it's really won at the operational level, NWP-3 devotes Chapter 3 to operational art and design. It provides a basic framework, kind of roughed out there with that sketch, that aligns commanders and staffs to enable them to use their ingenuity, cunning, creativity, and intellect to develop campaigns and major operations. Now, certainly a lot has been written in academia and in doctrine about operational art. NWP-3 doesn't try to supplant that. It just tries to provide a common baseline to enable the application of individual assessment of all that's been written to develop their campaigns and strategies. Now, it does state that essentially fleet warfare is comprised of capabilities used to wage war, logistics used to sustain war, and command used to direct war. And those bound what's achievable in fleet strategy. Similarly, NWP-3 provides kind of a discussion to help the commanders and staffs in their operational design. I think joint doctrine identifies something like 13 different elements of operational design. NWP-3 doesn't compete or supplant that either. It just provides considerations regarding enemy capability and will, annihilation and erosion strategies, differences between sequential and cumulative campaigns, Wiley's great insight, and discusses direct and indirect approaches. Now, traditionally, Navy literature, Navy writ large, has been somewhat loose in terms of in their terminology regarding fleet command and the term fleet commander. It's been used variously to describe a numbered fleet commander, a component commander, and a major fleet commander. So NWP-3 being doctrine kind of doubles down on that doctrine and the true meanings of the words, and specifies that a component commander, whether working as a Navy component or a Joint Force Maritime component commander, really orchestrates tactical activity for strategic effect at the operational level. And then numbered fleet commanders, as the Navy's highest warfighting organization, take the fight to the enemy, that Navy fleets are fighting fleets. Now, one of the more illuminating graphics, or at least certainly one of the ones that inspired the most conversation during the drafting and review phase, was this organizational chart of the operational chains of command. It's really interesting to see the variety of command and control arrangements that map our 7 numbered fleets up through to the joint combatant commands. And fleet warfare closes with an appendix discussing the Battle of the Philippine Sea. It starts with a timeline of the days leading up to and including the Battle of the Philippine Sea. excuse me, now it's heavily exerted. It takes extracts from Buell's great Spruance biography, A Quiet Warrior. So the reading in the timeline is quite lively. So it's not as dull as you might think. And then afterwards, it reviews those elements listed there, some of the ideas and concepts provided in NWP-3, and it reviews them in the context of the circumstances that was facing Admiral Spruance and his Fifth Fleet in those days of June 1944. So in closing, NWP-3 is a brand new doctrine document dedicated to the fundamentals at the operational level of warfare, and specifically focused on the high end of the competition continuum. So with that, I appreciate your attention, and I'll turn it back over to Otte for a conversation, and I look forward to the discussion. Thanks very much.
And Tom, thank you for a great overview of the document itself. I've prepared a handful, actually probably closer to 10 questions, just to dig down into a little bit more into some of the key, what I took takeaways at least, with regards to the document from when I read it over a few weeks back. So my first question is, as you mentioned, Admiral Gilday, the CNO, published his first directive back in December of 2019, where he focused on three pillars: war fighting, the war fighter, and the future fleet. Now you've touched on it, but I'd like to ask you if you could drill down just a little bit more on how this doctrinal document incorporates those tenets of the CNO's FRIGO.
Well, they all three really intersect with the concept of fleet-centric warfare, don't they? I mean, the CNO charged the fleet to master fleet-level warfare. So number one, NWP-3 provides the framework for that. But if you think back to the architecture, it kind of places the parts in their proper position so that institutionally and individually we can kind of think about how they fit into the overall construct and contribute to that master of fleet level warfare. Certainly, war fighting, the war fighter and the future fleet, those are certainly fundamental institutional objectives that go directly into the unit level that create combat ready forces. Certainly our focus on war fighting, at both the tactical and operational level, tries to combine the capabilities of those combat ready forces into coherent engagements and ultimately strategies. So it provides kind of a way of thinking about how all of the various parts really fit together into a coherent, focused whole for the organization.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. My second question revolves on this idea of the joint fight. Future warfare, much as we've seen over the last 20, 30 years, the Navy will be engaged much more or as much in with the other services in the joint fight, if you will, as fighting as an individual service. Shouldn't this document have kind of gone into that a little bit more? Again, you show it in some of the graphics, but there's not a lot of depth associated with that in this document. Why is that?
Right. I really appreciate that insight. My answer is to paraphrase Bill Belichick. I mean, rule number one of being a good teammate is do your job. And so we are focused squarely on mastering our domain. We have a clear and overriding responsibility to the nation and the joint force to be preeminent, provide that maritime superiority in our domain, or at least in support of the joint strategic military objective. So, I mean, the joint force is crippled without our ability to do our own job. So we focus very heavily in what I like to say is an unabashedly realistic and unashamedly naval perspective when you're writing these capstone naval doctrine documents, because we have unique contributions to the nation and the joint force, and certainly we have to integrate with that force, but we need to master our own capabilities first. Now, there's tie-ins to the joint force at several different levels. First of all, the idea of mock integration and the fact that a carrier battle group or an amphibious ready group, the capabilities that they might need in a tactical situation are increasingly beyond their reach, either in authority or access. And it goes back to the fleet then to integrate those other, naval, joint, national, combined capabilities to bring those together. So, not distinctly joint in nature, because this is a Navy warfare pub focused on doing our job. It offers those off ramps where we really have to exercise our collaboration and integration with the joint force. So it recognizes the need for that. It recognizes that, what we do fundamentally enables the joint force in the pursuit of joint strategic military objectives. But this is how we think in terms of establishing that maritime superiority required by the joint force.
All right, that does clear it up for me, and I certainly appreciate that insight. And I fully agree. We need to be able to fight first, and then fight within later. So you mentioned the tri-service maritime strategy previously, and again, just trying to get a little bit more insight as you were writing this document. I was wondering, what is that relationship? How does this support and or advance that tri-service document that was signed just a couple months ago also?
Right. Good question. Well, excuse me. What I'd say is that NWP-3 provides an intellectual framework to align thinking across the Navy about fleet warfare at the high end. TSMS really discusses various organizational and institutional objectives to position the institution and operate the Navy, based on the current geopolitical circumstances. Capstone Doctrine, Naval Doctrine Publication 1, and NWP-3 are kind of larger, almost geostrategic documents that, America is an island nation. Most people don't realize or consider it that, but we're an island nation. That drives us towards a requirement for a strong, globally proficient Navy, preeminent Navy. And that's a function of geography, so that's why we need our Navy for our 5 enduring functions. That's what the nation buys when they buy the Navy. Now, the tri-service maritime strategy, or any strategy for that matter, really is talking about how you're going to use those capabilities depending on the current geopolitical circumstances at the time. So if you look back over the last couple of decades, you'll see, during the Cold War, there was kind of a focus more on the sea control type strategies. And then in the interlude, post-Cold War, our strategies shifted over more towards power projection, which were the requirements of the time, the geopolitical requirements of the time. And now, with the resumption of great power competition, our strategies are shifting back more towards a sea control focus. That doesn't mean the strategies are wrong. It just means this is how we're optimally positioning our capabilities to focus on what confronts us today. So, kind of writ large, doctrine, at least at this level, doctrine is kind of the rule book or the guidebook on how the game is played, whereas the strategies are how you intend to win the next game. So does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you. Captain Hammer, I see your hand up, and you raised it during the discussion with regards to going back to that joint fight. So I don't know if the question is specific on that, but I want to hand this over to you so that you can go ahead and ask your question.
Sure. Thank you very much. And Captain Negus, thank you very much for a great brief, and more importantly, this seminal document, which is, I think, very, very important in many, many ways, not just for the operational forces, but for those in the shore establishment who really need to understand this. So great job. The question is this. Your slides noted the increasing role of technology in this era of warfare. And CNO in NAV Plan 2021 says that we want a naval force that can outthink and outfight any enemy. So if you think about those two things, the fact that we're becoming increasingly reliant upon technology, and I think the naval service has always pretty much been that way, and the fact that the CNO really is looking for us to have a force that can outthink and outfight any enemy, had you given any thoughts to what appears to be problem of fewer and fewer unrestricted line officers getting advanced education in these technologies? It would seem that there's some kind of disconnect there, and might impede them in their ability to both acquire and employ this advanced technology in fleet warfare.
Right. Now that's a great point, sir. Frankly, no, it's not. It's not really addressed in NWP-3 in terms of fleet warfare, in terms of those specific terms. Naval Doctrine Publication 1 does highlight the need for continual professional education, and specifically the need to outthink our enemies and adversaries. What we've tried to do is, at least number one, provide a structured framework that would align people in their thinking and hopefully reduce some of that institutional friction, reduce the coefficient of friction across the board writ large, and try to provide documents for the CNO and to kind of pin upon or point to in terms of the need when he talks about the need to develop our war fighters, when he talks in his NAV plan about his about his four focus areas and stuff. So hopefully, his last section on sailors, hopefully we're able to at least provide some clarity institutionally in terms of how those capabilities then can be pinned on to the overall architecture and make us a more efficient and effective fighting force. Did that cover it, sir?
Yes, that's very good. Thanks very much. Great job. Appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
All right, Tom, we've got a question in chat, and when we were joking around before we started, and you said Jeff Klein could not ask you any questions. Unfortunately, he has, and I'm going to pass it on. Jeff writes, with our adversaries' new capabilities, do we believe that this document, NWP-3, will inform future fleet composition studies to better execute fleet warfare?
Frankly, I hope so. I think it can. I think I think the concepts and structure it can be built upon through the great work throughout the fleet, the Naval Postgraduate School, et cetera, and build upon and really inform that. I think this does provide a solid intellectual foundation that explains what we want to do with our Navy writ large in these high-end competition circumstances, which is, we've got to focus on the high end. So yes, I guess my short answer is yes. But before I go, I have to, I really meant Jeff was very, very helpful, particularly in helping me. He reviewed an early draft. He was very, very instrumental in parsing out the separate themes of advancing technology and great power competition, and the discrete impacts that those have on shaping our approach to fleet warfare. So he was very instrumental to that whole section, in addition to his very insightful comments throughout. But Jeff, my sincere appreciation for your great insight and comments and effort.
Well, you're very welcome. I just wanted to say that I'm not coming on camera right now because Captain Otte has his National War College tie on and I don't have mine on. So, well, Dr. Boger's got a question for you though, Doug, so I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, shoot, I don't have my National War College tie on either. I'm sorry.
I bet I should have better coordinated that. My apologies to my my friends out there. Dr. Boger, over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, Captain Negus. It's a good presentation, and I've been urging my students to read NWP-3, and I'm hoping that some of them are. I was absolutely delighted to see your use of Wayne Hughes' work on salvo equations and its implication for the tactical fight, that as fighters on the sea, we need to fire effectively first, and that's his tactical bumper sticker. Those salvo equations also have an implication for force design issues that Jeff raised, and that is that if you put all your eggs in one basket, i.e. a multi-purpose vessel, given the attrition characteristics of missile warfare today, you're going to lose at least some, if not all of those functions whenever that vessel is at least disabled, if not sunk. That argues for single-purpose vessels, and Wayne was a big proponent of that. I know that you do not address force design issues in NWP-3, but my question is, given that strong implication of Wayne's work and the fact that several of us here at NPS have been pushing those single-purpose vessels for quite a while, do you see us making any headway with the force design folks on the OpNav staff? Over.
Oh, boy, holy moly. I guess I'd have to answer again that I certainly hope so. But so hopefully what we've done, in deriving essentially the operational concept from Wayne Hughes's work on the naval combat processes, hopefully focusing on or codifying our concept of integration, distribution, and maneuver, that'll at least provide a basic foundational intellectual line of thought that can be used to support OpNav efforts at force development. So I think the concepts are inherent within NWP-3, but to go into force development probably beyond the remit of our doctrine guidance.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear you're hopeful too. Oh.
Yeah, that's a drum that's going to be, I can almost guarantee you, continue to be beaten by the graduate school and some of the folks out there. Great question.
Right. So I think that's important. That's why it's so important, I think, for institutional, strategic consistency, right, for these ideas, so that and it's pretty straightforward. It's not a hard concept to get. The 600 ship strategy, was relatively simple at its core. It's certainly founded on great intellectual rigor. Hopefully, we're being able to develop that again with our capstone doctrine intellectual foundation that can be built upon by the incredible talents across our naval enterprise.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great questions coming in. I will continue to keep the audience as engaged as I possibly can. I was planning on asking another one of my questions, but we just had two more come in, so I'm gonna go in with those. Ron, and I'm not gonna butcher your last name, Ron. I apologize. I'm not familiar with with how it's pronounced. But Ron has asked, has the concept of what constitutes a fleet changed from World War II and spruance now to sensors and weapons that have a reach measured in hundreds and even thousands of miles? Has the ability of fleet commanders to communicate with the shore changed the idea of a fleet?
Oh, that's a great question. I think NWP-3 tries to begin to get its arms around that when it talks about, our concepts are much more about massing effects than massing platforms, and extrapolating from that and the operational concepts that you're going to have to develop a capability to access increasing capabilities, at the speed of the fight, and just like capabilities are now exceeding the fight, the reach of the deployed tactical commander. We might get to a point where they exceed the reach of the fleet commander. But certainly the idea that a fleet encompasses much more than X number of ships and planes and subs is inherent in the ideas that are talking about the massing of effects versus the massing of platforms. And certainly in the discussions about the ISRT requirements, and confounding the enemies while protecting your capabilities, at least it expands the thinking outside the traditional platform-focused nature that we usually think of when we think of the fleet. So I'm afraid I didn't adequately answer that, but I think that it kind of gets to the heart of that question when we talk about the concepts of our fighting at a fleet level.
All right, thank you. And Dan, or Ron, if you have any follow-on questions, just go ahead and type them in or ask them. Dr. Don Brunsman has more of a comment, I guess. Let's see, as he starts it out, comment. Aligning NWP-3 fleet warfare concepts and terminology in various NWSI studies, courses, and publications is likely to improve excellent improvements in clarity, cross-disciplinary correspondence, and comprehension. So I'll leave it up to you if you want to comment on his comment.
Well, certainly, again, I'm a very optimistic guy because I'm hoping an awful lot, but I certainly hope that I hope that's the case. My vision for doctrine is that it really, tightens the Venn diagram, and particularly as we enter this era, a maritime era of great power competition that will rely on our skills. The tighter we can get our story, the tighter we can get our thinking, I think the better for our nation.
Once again, absolutely, I concur 100%. Captain Hammer has another question. With respect to the fire effectively first technology and specifically cyber, does fleet warfare account for these concepts? Firing cyber first might render ships and aircraft much less relevant.
Right. So it does address. Interesting. We got some great feedback from 10th Fleet that talked about first mover advantage, which was kind of an extrapolation of fire effectively first into the cyber realm, and so we put that prominently in the warfighting concepts section to address that. That's a viable fleet asset or capability or element of strategy, since we're talking OLW.
Well, thank you. I don't see any hands raised or any questions in the chat, so I'm going to go on back to one of mine that I have. And again, audience, please keep the great questions coming. NWP-3, the document references, this doctrinal document, references a number of Navy and military historians, including Sun Tzu, Mahan, and even our own Wayne Hughes. I guess my question is, based on this historical foundation that you presented throughout the document, why is the Battle of Philippine Sea such a good example to use in discussing fleet warfare?
You know, I think it's just a very human example of the complexity and ambiguity involved in fleet warfare. You know, so you have Admiral Spruance, who's tasked to support the taking of the Marianas Islands. When he starts out, he's not sure if the Japanese are going to try to oppose it. In fact, he doesn't think they're going to. Over the next couple of days, you know, he gets spurious comments. He's trying to piece together the picture. You know, he goes ahead. They land on Saipan. It goes really well. He gives a go-ahead for another D-Day. But all of a sudden, things change when he gets more information. Now he's got to worry about his fleet. You know, he starts talking with his senior leaders. You know, and Mitcher is of the mind, well, we need to go out and sink the Japanese. We need to attack the, you know, Uno Deer. We, you know, recommend we go at 0500 and attack the, and so what you have is that you've got two campaigns essentially coalescing in real time, you know, under tremendous pressure. So you've got the support to the joint campaign, the support to the Marianas Island effort, competing with the sea control, the campaign for maritime superiority. And so you've got Spruance trying to understand this, balance the two, balance resources and effort, one against the other, against very vocal and passionate opposition from Task Force 58 Commander Vice Admiral Mischer. And there's a nice little footnote. Buell has a great story about how Burke and Thatch stay up all night writing proposed responses, ghost telegrams for Mitcher back to Spruance about telling, you know, pack your bag. If you don't want to fight these guys, you know, you can get somebody else. And it's just so human. It's just all so human. And he's trying to parse, but at the same time, it's a great example of the competition between those campaigns. And so it just seemed to wrap up so many of the things that I saw another, you know, through research. It just seemed to be just the best example. You know, one final note, because it'll, you know, at the end of the day, they had a great tactical victory. They understood that they knocked out an awful lot of Japanese aircraft. You know, they had a very accurate count, as a matter of fact. And then they realized that, you know, that okay, their naval forces might no longer be under great threat. So he gave the go-ahead to go chase after the Japanese fleet. You know, and that whole idea is kind of assessment in real time. You know, they assess that fleet as still a very potent force, and that was that belief was manifest in the heroic launching of something like 226 planes off the carriers, even though they knew they were kind of doubtful of their ability to safely return. You know, it was just they had this one shot that they might be able to sink their ships, and the assessment at the operational level, it drove that incredible heroism. So in the end, you know, they didn't realize the magnitude of their great victory. So they all came away from the Battle of the Philippine Sea, you know, a bit dissatisfied. You know, so even at the end, there's always that human element of you know, interlaced throughout all that story that I've done a very poor job of explaining. So I encourage you to read the timeline. But I don't know. It was just all of the complexity and ambiguity, you know, against the competing campaigns, all done in a very human way. So Sorry for a bit of a ramble, but it was really, really a great, great example.
Well, thank you. No, actually, I liked your explanation and really hit home, and that intersection that you talked about between the naval battle versus the entire campaign and the strategic objectives associated with that battle of Philippine Sea. So that did strike a note in mind. I do have a Quiet Warrior in my shelf back there in the background, and now you've encouraged me to pick it up and read it once again. Let's see which one. Yeah, there we go. Captain Hammer saved me again. Now, while you answer his questions, I'll go ahead and figure out which one of mine I'm going to ask next. But John says, centralized planning, decentralized execution has long been a traditional warfighting approach. Is there risk in an approach where MOC plays a major role in execution? Nimitz was reluctant to take part in execution. It seems that NWP-3 might be headed in the opposite direction.
Well, that's a great insight. That's a great point, because I think what it does is highlight some of the confusion that I think exists in the Navy, me speaking, about boundaries and responsibilities, and the role of MOCs, Maritime Operational Centers. NWP-3 is written that MOCs are a numbered fleet commanders certainly are war fighting organizations. I think of them as the CICs that were introduced early in World War II that kind of coordinate capability and information for greater combat effect. But I think it's very important to note that we're not conflating fighting in NWP-3 to the operational level of warfare, but rather we're a numbered fleet commander is not an operational commander when he's doing tactical things, and a numbered fleet commander is primarily a tactical warfighting organization. So it's kind of pushing the intellectual construct down to the tactical level, I guess. Now that certainly has inherent risks of, as Captain Hammer points out, about extending micromanagement or something. But that's why we've got to integrate, practice, experiment with getting a MOC to deliver capabilities to the home team and delivering effects against the enemy, at the speed of the fight. And so that's one of the great challenges that's brought on through the expansion or the advancement of all this technology. So it's not, so there is, I agree, you have to be careful about the control by direction versus the control by negation of the mission command. And that's why that's such an important concept. And that's why we've got to continue to inculcate that and institutionalize that, particularly now as the capabilities expand beyond the reach of the local folks engaged in fighting. But fundamentally, it's a function of pushing the intellectual thinking back down to the tactical level and understanding how, a fleet commander and a MOC will actually do that. Now, in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Spruance was straddling the operational with the tactical, and Nimitz was certainly far removed at the operational level and oftentimes strategically. He's talking strategy with presidents. But, during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Spruance sat in his chair on the bridge and read, while the fight was going on. So there's some example for maintaining distance and perspective as well. So a bit of a ramble again, Captain Hammer, but I think the idea really is to be very clear about what's tactical and what's operational, and then and in that sense separate and parse it apart and practice so that to gain proficiency at each.
All right, thank you for that response. Sorry, I stepped on you there, John. Go ahead. Okay, that question and particularly your answer may be a segue into my next question I have, but I'm going to ask it anyway. One of the things we do, at the postgraduate school is we talk to our students about the fact that the enemy always has a vote as far as how the fight will ultimately progress. So my question is, how does this doctrinal document provide the warfighter the flexibility to adjust to what the enemy is doing?
Well, I think really it's through its strong reliance and recognition of Wayne Hughes's ideas that warfare is a duel, and that the enemy always has a vote. So I've used several of his quotes to highlight the fact that none of this is static, that all of this always is a move, counter move, or even concurrent move. And then so as you're considering your actions, you're also trying to figure out how to confound the enemy's actions and reactions. So it does recognize the intrinsic linkage between the two. That's primarily done in the operational in Chapter 2 in the operational concept section, but also towards the end, when most of Chapter 4 is devoted towards the idea of mission command, commander's intent, and command and control in a degraded environment, denied degraded environment, and so it's focused on the necessity for mission command and the benefits of mission command and the need to institutionally, invest in mission command. As a more to provide the ethereal response capability against enemy reaction, I think supports that idea as well.
Absolutely. Again, thank you. Lieutenant Sam Royster is asking, how does NWP-3 address the improvements/investments in industry and private shipyards, in particular, that will be needed to enable construction of that 200 plus unmanned ships needed to help us to get to the 600 ships Navy?
Well, again, I hope that it is helpful in that endeavor. I think it provides, again, the intellectual foundation, rigorous intellectual foundation to make the case for each of those things mentioned. But it doesn't really get into the programmatics or any of the force design issues, but it provides the warfighting alignment that is necessary to arbitrate or to debate for that, advocate for those capabilities.
All right, thank you. Between the questions I've asked and what the audience have asked, that's eliminated a number of my questions. I'm down to one, so I'm going to just pause here for a minute to see if there are any other questions from the audience, because my question is really, for you to get off the stage, if you will, a question for you. So, are there any other questions from our audience this afternoon? All right, I'm sorry, Lukey, I didn't notice your hand was raised. Go ahead.
Touch the same subject and restrict a line officer to get PhD. And the most important thing is these officers should be able to make a decision. Do not need the ability, PhD ability to apply to do themselves, but they need to pass the right judgment. We need more Navy leaders like Wayne Hughes in the new era. They grow the computer, they can pass the right judgment to correctly judge what technology can and cannot accomplish in particular situation, not influenced by buzzword, by media. And the academia is complicated also, but as a Navy, independently determine what's your need. It's a very, very independent decision also. And number two, the subject on Seapower table, Seapower equation is important because they pull the effort together from a combat system to weapon systems to joint fire to increase the PK. So because of that, that's important.
Well, I certainly agree with what I understand to be the gist of both of those issues. I mean, the decision making is fundamental, and I think that, and hopefully, by establishing a rigorous intellectual, so really the key to combat is not out thinking; it's out acting your opponent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's. So you've got to think and then you've got to act. So that requires you've got to decide. So it's the speed of decision that's really critical. And hopefully, by providing rigorous doctrine, you eliminate some microscopic friction, in the heat of those moments, and that so that you have depth, you have pre-thought out depth, so that you can act. At the time required to attack effectively first. And certainly salvo equations, they get more complicated as you enter into the realm of information warfare and, of course, first mover advantage and things. But yeah, I found them to be very helpful in terms of thinking about and shaping my thinking as I was writing this publication.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Matt Bonzel, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, let's see. It says I'm muted. Am I still? I'm good. Okay. I may have missed it. I had to drop off. I'm sorry, but it seems as if you've tried to clarify the distinctions between the various levels of engagement. So tactical, operational, strategic. How do you see unmanned as all the vehicles that we're thinking about for the unmanned side as an inject to the force composition, muddying the distinction between the various levels of the fight?
Well, I think fundamentally, I mean, fighting is at the tactical level. I mean, does a conductor make music? And the conductor's at the operational level. But I mean, certainly the question is well beyond that in terms of the role of unmanned vehicles and doctrine and how that fits in. I think right now, personal opinion again, is that unmanned is kind of an extension of capability of our manned capabilities right now. I think that there'll be, concepts will have to be explored and tested through tabletop and war games to be able to get to a solid doctrinal answer. I think that is too nascent really to provide doctrine beyond the tenets of warfighting structure that we provide in NWP-3. But that's certainly an area that has got to be really thought through and really explored and really experimented with in the future. Does that answer your question?
Well, I was thinking specifically building on Ron Giacchetti and some things that John Hammer had talked about of what do we mean by the tactical fighter? That if I've got command and control of the unmanned whatever it might be, the pipes to make that happen allow anybody anywhere to be in tactical command of those vehicles. And so as far as an extension of the fighter, well, the fighter now is sitting in Nevada, or the fighter is, you know, away from what we naturally consider the battle to be. And it makes me think, if I've got that capability, why would I ever want to put that command and control responsibility in situ? Why do I want to put them at risk when I can hold them not at risk? So that was kind of where I was going.
Okay, well, right. Well, that's a great point in terms of, you know, the role of the mocks. You know, I think that's a perfect extension of what I think is still personal opinion, again, that our concept of mocks. I don't think we really have a solid grasp. I mean, it's had quite the bedeviled past, but you know, that's where right now, anyways, the Navy is structured to start bringing in all of these capabilities that are not in situ, that are integrating with joint capabilities, national capabilities, combined capabilities, unmanned capabilities. That is really the warfighting organization that partners with the in situ forces to create tactical success.
Yeah, right on, right on. So good. Thanks so much. I really appreciated this as an NDoc. I had tried to get my SEA students to dial in, and I think I saw a couple, but I wish more had the opportunity. So, hey, Otter, you can tell me, is this recorded so that we can, and is it through NWSI that we're going to see the recording?
Matt, absolutely. It is being recorded, and hopefully we'll have it posted to the NWSI site under the Seapower Conversations pillar this afternoon, maybe tomorrow morning at the latest.
Wonderful, thanks.
You bet. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions coming up, and we're 8 minutes after the hour. So I'm going to ask my final question, John, and then we will hold on if somebody else does have any questions. I'm not going to cut anybody off. So I'll hang around, and hopefully Tom will hang around until everybody else has left the site. But as a final question, and your response to a number of the questions that were asked today was, when they were asking about the influence of the document, you're like, well, I certainly hope so. You know, so as the author and the researcher that put in, you know, hundreds, probably, you know, thousands of hours into this document, what is your desire? What do you foresee coming out of this doctrinal publication?
Well, what I'd really like to see is some greater institutional clarity, fundamentally, about the operational level of war. You know, does a conductor make music? You know, we fight at the tactical level of warfare, and we orchestrate the operational level of warfare. I mean, the vast naval enterprise is focused at the tactical level of warfare, and I think we confuse things when we start talking about, oh, fighting at the operational level. And just because a numbered fleet commander is doing something does not make it operational. NWP-3 is very clear about, you know, the objective of the activity, and not the echelon of command determines, you know, the intellectual construct level. You know, false though it may be, you know, but in terms of organizing thinking, I think that's very important, because as I mentioned before, what that really does, you know, is it increases the overlap on the Venn diagram across the entire enterprise. And by providing the structured framework, everybody can fit in there and hopefully reduce that institutional coefficient of friction towards more efficient and effective action. I hope also that there's that we continue to clarify the narrative, the naval narrative, first provided in Naval Doctrine Publication 1, you know, about the role of the naval service, you know, in Navy itself. That it's increasingly important that we really have our story together, but at the same time, we've got to internalize that and have a rigorous and have a much smaller standard deviation, I think, in terms of really organization. I think too, I think an evolution of mocks is required. I mean, they've had quite the bedeviled past. You know, I think they started as an instrument to enable our commanders to be joint force commanders, joint force maritime component commanders and things. And so we were wrapped up in all, you know, and then we talk about, well, you know, mocks are developed to bridge the gap between tactical activity, you know, and strategic guidance. I mean, that's written in the mock standardization manual. You know, what that tells me is that we're saying our tactical activity lacks strategic coherence and that we need mocks to do that. I don't buy that at all, personally, again, personal opinion. But I see mocks as a necessary extension to integrate all of these capabilities that we're all working on, that incredibly brilliant people are creating and developing. And we've got to figure out a way how to make those mocks tactically relevant at the speed of the fight, just like we did with CICs, Combat Information Centers, back in 1941, 42, I guess. You know, we have to see those as an extension of warfighting capability, you know, that provides those in situ forces capabilities and assists them in delivering effects. And so that's, and then finally, I think just an appreciation for what the Navy and Naval Service brings to the joint force and to the nation. You know, I think that, and that goes towards understanding our narrative and understanding how vitally important the Naval Service's role is. That without the Naval Service, the joint force is effectively crippled. We can pinprick, but we can't create strategic change. For that, you need the Naval Service. So I would summarize it as that in that lengthy summary.
Well, good. Thank you, and good job there, Tom, coalescing you know, this entire work into, you know, just a couple-minute explanation. So I would like to take the opportunity on behalf of the Naval Warfare Studies Institute to thank you for taking time out of your busy week and spending that with us and giving us the insights that you have provided for us today. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this conversation. And so thank you for your attendance. And as I mentioned, Tom and I will hang around until everybody's left the site, just in case there's an, oh, by the way, or a question that does come up. But again, thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you again on our next Seapower Conversation.
Thank you very much, Otte, for having me, and I'll stand by for anybody else who wants to discuss anything further. But again, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and the Naval Warfare Studies Institute today. Thank you very much.